What if a simple photograph, taken over a century ago, held a secret no one noticed for decades? Why did a young girl vanish weeks after it was captured? And what is the shadowy figure in the window that wasn't supposed to be there? Is it just a trick of the light? Or something that's been watching, waiting, hidden in plain sight? Some images capture memories, others refuse to let go. If you want to follow real stories that defy time and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our investigations. It was a mild afternoon in early April 1921 when the townsfolk of Norfield, Mississippi, gathered at the modest white chapel near the edge of the pine woods. The occasion was simple, a wedding, small and unadorned, but remembered fondly by those who attended. The bride's cousin, a shy 17-year-old named Eleanor Reed, had been asked to hold the bouquet for the ceremonial photo, a quiet honor in a time when photographs were rare and reverent affairs. Eleanor stood alone beside the arched window, the light casting a pale aura around her. She wore a modest cotton dress with hand-stitched embroidery, the kind passed down through generations. In her hands, a bundle of white gardenias tied with a faded blue ribbon. Her expression was solemn, but not unusual. In that era, smiling in photographs was uncommon, too intimate, too modern. She looked just beyond the camera, lips parted slightly, as if on the verge of speech. The photograph, printed on matte gelatin silver paper and mounted on a decorative cardboard frame, was labeled on the back in delicate handwriting, E. Reed, Norfield Chapel, April 3, 1921. It remained for decades in a family album, later archived in the local historical society when the last of the Reeds left town in the early 50s. It was considered unremarkable, save for its age and its preservation, a visual relic of a time when lives moved slower and the world felt smaller. But even then, something in the image resisted full comfort. Visitors often remarked on the atmosphere it conveyed, something quiet, but not peaceful, not ominous, but distant, as if the girl in the frame stood just beyond reach, looking towards something no one else could see. The window beside her reflected the hazy light of the spring afternoon, the blurred suggestion of trees, and perhaps, though none would notice at first, something more. Eleanor's life, by local accounts, was equally unassuming. She lived with her mother, a widowed seamstress, in a small wooden house near the lumber yard. She rarely left town, had no suitors of note, and spent most afternoons reading or walking the forest paths behind the church. Her diary, preserved in fragments, described her dreams with uncommon clarity, dreams of long corridors, of tapping sounds at the glass, and of voices calling her name from somewhere she couldn't quite identify. A week before the photograph was taken, Eleanor had visited the town doctor complaining of fatigue and an unshakable feeling of being watched. He attributed it to nerves, or perhaps anemia. No treatment was prescribed. She returned home and resumed her quiet routine. On the day of the wedding, she arrived early, already dressed, holding the bouquet as if it had been given to her long before. Those who knew her remembered that she stood near the window for longer than necessary after the photo was taken, her gaze fixed on the woods beyond the chapel fence. When asked what she was looking at, she replied simply, "Nothing, just listening." No one thought much of it. At the time, the photograph was a moment of stillness in a life like so many others, rural, uneventful, destined to vanish into the folds of unrecorded history. But this image, more than any diary or recollection, would become the only lasting trace of Eleanor Reed, and in time, it would become clear that she was not alone in that moment. Not entirely. In the autumn of 1974, over half a century after the photograph was taken, a group of graduate students from the University of Mississippi arrived at the Norfield Historical Society. Their task was part of a broader academic initiative to digitize and catalog forgotten rural archives, preserving what remnants remained of southern townships whose histories had quietly faded. Among the yellowed documents, brittle maps, and sun-warped portraits, one photograph stood out, not for its subject, but for its stillness. Eleanor Reed's portrait, catalogued under RE 1921 Chap 04, was scanned and stored without much ceremony. It was Douglas Train, then 27 and meticulous to the point of obsession, who first noticed the irregularity. While enhancing the image resolution for digital archiving, he zoomed in on the edge of the frame, the arched window to the left of Eleanor's shoulder. The detail was faint, almost imperceptible. A smear, a defect in the glass, but it held a shape, a vertical form, out of place, the curve of a shoulder, perhaps, the faint line of a collar, and something darker where a face should have been, not absent, but obscured, as if turned away or cloaked in shadow. Initially dismissed as a trick of the glass or an artifact of age, the image began to circulate within the group. Curiosity became fixation. One student suggested it looked like a man standing just behind the window, but records showed no one else present during the photo. The chapel had been empty. The photographer's log confirmed it. The reflection, if such it was, didn't match the environment. No pews, no altar, just trees and a figure. As word of the anomaly spread, the photograph drew the attention of Professor Harold Meeks, a historian known for his work on Southern folklore and visual anomalies in pre-modern photography. Meeks, skeptical by nature, examined the image under various spectrums. He confirmed that the reflection did not align with any known subject in the frame. More curiously, the angle of light from the window didn't support the presence of a figure. If someone had been standing behind Eleanor, their form would have disrupted the natural light, but the photograph showed no such interference. The lighting was consistent, unbroken. Questions emerged. Could the image have been tampered with? But the original negative, long since degraded, showed the same trace. Even in its earliest form, the figure, if it was a figure, remained. Meeks offered a tentative theory: double exposure, a rare but known occurrence in early cameras. Yet he couldn't explain why the reflection only appeared in the window, not elsewhere on the glass pane, nor in any other part of the photo. It was localized, deliberate in placement. The debate soon moved beyond academic circles. Paranormal researchers, drawn by whispers of the Norfield reflection, began probing the town's history. They found no record of a man matching the vague outline in the glass. No attendees at the wedding claimed to have seen anyone unusual. The photographer had died in 1949, his estate offering no clues, but the photo lingered, now digitized, magnified, and dissected frame by frame. Among the few remaining descendants of the Reed family, an elderly cousin recalled a curious rumor that Eleanor had spoken, in her final weeks, of someone she saw near the chapel, a man she didn't know. He had stood by the trees, just beyond the fence, watching, waiting. She said he came only in the afternoon, when the light hit the windows just right. No one believed her. Why would they? Train, unable to let the matter rest, began collecting similar photographs from surrounding towns and years. He believed the answer lay not in the image itself, but in a pattern waiting to be revealed. At night, he studied the photograph with the lights off, the glow of the screen casting Eleanor's face in pale relief. He began dreaming of windows, of figures behind glass, of hands pressed against the pane, unmoving, and always the reflection remained, unexplained. In the weeks that followed the rediscovery of Eleanor Reed's photograph, Douglas Train turned his attention not to the image itself, but to the history surrounding it, the quiet web of records, testimonies, and overlooked details that orbit a single life forgotten by time. It was there, in the brittle municipal archives of Copiah County, that he uncovered a discrepancy, subtle but deeply unsettling. Eleanor Reed had vanished. The date was April 24th, 1921, exactly 3 weeks after the photograph was taken. According to a missing person report filed by her mother, Eleanor left the house shortly after noon to deliver a parcel to a neighbor and never arrived. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses, no unusual weather or road conditions. Her route was familiar, a short walk along a wooded path, well traveled by townsfolk. She had done it many times before. Her disappearance, at the time, prompted a modest search effort. Neighbors combed the forest edge, a telegram was sent to nearby townships, and the sheriff organized a patrol along the rail lines. But after a few days, attention waned. With no evidence and no body, the case slipped into silence. In the local paper, her absence was noted only briefly. Local girl missing, feared runaway. There was no follow-up. Yet Train found one document that diverged from the official narrative, a letter, yellowed and creased, preserved in a private family collection donated to the university. It was addressed to Reverend Malcolm Crane, the minister of Norfield Chapel, in 1921. Dated April 18th, 6 days before Eleanor vanished, it bore her name and signature. In neat, hesitant cursive, she wrote, "The knocking has returned. Every afternoon, at the same hour. I've stopped answering. He does not come to the door anymore, only to the window. Mother doesn't see him. I don't know if he's real." The letter had never been mailed. It had remained in a bundle of personal effects, tied with ribbon and untouched for decades. There was no mention of it in any police report, nor had the Reverend, who died in 1934, made note of it in his journals. What made the discovery more troubling was that Eleanor's description, the knocking, the figure by the window, aligned with themes Train had seen before, scattered across other minor historical accounts. A girl in Tennessee, 1894, said to have gone pale from a shadow at the glass. A boy in Arkansas, 1906, who refused to sleep near windows and was later found wandering alone in the woods, unable to speak. These accounts, thin and disjointed, shared a common thread of vague unease and ambiguous witnesses, and in several cases, there had been photographs. The pattern was not clean, the gaps were numerous, but something lingered beneath the surface, a rhythm of disappearances, each orbiting a fragile intersection of isolation, adolescence, and the presence of windows. Train, methodical by nature, compiled the names, dates, and photographs. At first, the connections seemed circumstantial, but then came the most jarring discovery. On May 12, 1902, 19 years before Eleanor's photograph, another girl had vanished from a neighboring town. Her name was Louisa Dale. She was 17. A photograph taken just days before her disappearance bore a remarkable resemblance in composition. The same side profile, the same solemn posture, and in the corner of the glass behind her, a faint silhouette, unmistakable in its structure, a figure, tall, indistinct, seemingly watching. The negatives were too degraded to confirm conclusively, but Train felt the shape echoed the one in Eleanor's window, and Louisa's case had ended the same way, unresolved, unremarked, forgotten. When he returned to Norfield to speak with the remaining descendants of the Reed family, few remembered Eleanor at all. One woman, aged 92, recalled her mother speaking once of the girl who heard things that weren't there. Another remembered a saying passed around schoolyards in the late 20s, "Don't look too long at the glass, or he'll see you back." By now, Train had stopped viewing the photograph as an isolated anomaly. It was no longer a mystery to be solved, but a doorway into a larger pattern, not one of logic, but of resonance, a rhythm buried beneath the history of a region too quiet for coincidence. And still, he returned to the same question, repeated in his notes with obsessive clarity. If no one else saw him there, why did she? By early 1975, Douglas Train had expanded his research far beyond Norfield. What began as a curious anomaly in a single photograph had become something else entirely, a web of historical threads drawn tight across decades and counties, bound not by logic, but by recurrence. In the dim corners of public archives, university libraries, and privately held collections, he found echoes of the same visual disturbance, a figure, always faint, always peripheral, captured in glass behind the unaware. There was the 1913 school photo from Brookhaven, where a group of children stood before a classroom window. Near the left edge of the frame, obscured by glare, a human shape faced inward from outside, unusually tall, its hands raised as if touching the pane. No one in the photo acknowledged it. No one recalled seeing it that day. Or the 1898 portrait of a Mississippi midwife, seated beside a curtained window. The glass revealed a vague silhouette, indistinct yet humanoid, just at shoulder height. The photographer made no note of it, but the woman, Sarah Hale, aged 42, disappeared 2 weeks later. Her cabin was found undisturbed, her meals prepared but uneaten. A single chair turned toward the window as if in silent witness. Train marked each of these findings on a map. The locations formed no neat pattern, no satisfying shape, only a scattered series of points joined by silence. But they shared several traits: rural settings, subjects alone or near windows, and in each case, a subtle atmospheric shift in the image itself. something hard to name, not damage, not a trick of light, a presence, often overlooked until it was pointed out, and once seen, never unseen. He began referring to the figure privately as the Reverend. The name arose not from any religious association, but from its posture, upright, still, as if attending a ritual only it could perceive. The name was never published. Train feared ridicule. He kept his research locked in notebooks, handwritten and annotated with increasing urgency. It was not until he encountered the Fielder case that the tone of his inquiry changed. In 1937, in the town of Enid, Mississippi, a girl named Miriam Fielder vanished under similar circumstances, last seen walking home from a church recital, her absence attributed to elopement. No formal investigation followed, but a local photojournalist, Sam Ellery, had captured a candid image of Miriam days before, a casual portrait by her kitchen window, taken as part of a community series on rural life. That image, preserved in the archives of a local newspaper, showed something disturbingly familiar. The background revealed not one, but two reflections in the window pane, Miriam's own, and beside it, a second form, slightly behind, darker, its outline hazy yet unmistakable, as if it had been standing just outside, unseen. When Train compared the outline in Miriam's window to the figure in Eleanor's photo, the proportions aligned. The angle of the head, the posture, even the placement within the glass matched with eerie precision. Different towns, different decades, same shape, same absence of explanation. He consulted optical specialists, historians of early photographic techniques, even psychiatrists. The most common theory offered was pareidolia, the brain's tendency to perceive patterns, especially faces where none exist. But the consistency undermined that argument. The repetition was too precise, the frequency too rare to be random, and in each case, the subject either disappeared or fell into silence shortly after the image was captured. Train wrote in his final unpublished manuscript, "There is a resonance in certain windows, a point where presence folds in on itself, not a reflection, not a ghost, a witness perhaps, one that only watches until it doesn't." In April of 1975, Train vanished. His notes were found stacked in chronological order beside his desk, his apartment undisturbed. The last page bore a single sentence, underlined twice, "I saw it. It saw me back." The original photograph of Eleanor Reed now rests in the archives of the Mississippi State Historical Society, housed within a sealed, climate-controlled cabinet marked as restricted access. It is not part of any public exhibition, nor is it referenced in official museum literature. No signage points to its location. To request access, one must provide a written explanation of intent, a background check, and, more curiously, sign a liability waiver that acknowledges psychological risk. These requirements are not formally published. They are enforced quietly, passed from one archivist to the next like an unspoken right. Those who have seen the photograph in person speak with hesitation afterward, not of the image itself, which remains, on the surface, unchanged, but of the time spent in its presence, a lingering unease, as if the air within the archive shifts subtly once the photograph is revealed, a sense that something else occupies the space between the glass and the viewer's eye. The image has been scanned, reproduced, and distributed countless times, yet those digital copies lack a certain weight. It is only the original that draws whispers. In 1989, an intern at the archive, Thomas Keel, then 21, viewed the photograph during a late-night cataloging session. By the next morning, he had left the building without informing anyone. His car was found idling near a riverbank, driver's side door open, headlights still on. He returned 3 days later, soaked and incoherent, unable to explain where he had been. In the years that followed, Keel refused to discuss the incident. He now lives in a remote part of Oregon, where he operates a bookstore with no mirrors, no windows, and no internet access. In 1997, an independent researcher named Claire Minot requested access to the photo for a private project on early rural photography. She spent 37 minutes alone in the viewing room, then asked to see the negative. When informed it no longer existed, she reportedly laughed, said, "Of course," and left. Weeks later, She submitted an article to an obscure journal in which she claimed the figure in the window had moved. She included a digitally enhanced close-up, barely distinguishable from the known scans, and annotated it with vague references to posture and alignment. The journal declined to publish the piece, citing editorial concerns. Most recently, in 2012, a team from a European museum specializing in visual anomalies requested to analyze the image using modern scanning techniques. The process involved a multispectral imaging system designed to reveal underlayers and chemical anomalies in antique materials. During the final scan, the lead technician noted a faint distortion at the lower right corner of the photograph. At first, it was thought to be physical degradation, water damage perhaps. But when processed, the distortion formed a faint curve, the suggestion of a second shadow beneath the reflection in the window. When the technician attempted to rescan the area, the image file corrupted. Twice, the original remained intact, but each digital copy introduced new artifacts, smudges, blurred edges, and in one case, an unexplained light flare across Eleanor's face. The museum withdrew its interest. No report was issued. Privately, the team agreed not to discuss the results further. Among the archivists, a tradition has developed, quiet, informal, never written down. When the photograph is returned to storage, it must be placed face down for exactly 7 seconds before sealing. No one remembers when the practice began. No one questions it. And still, the question persists, passed like a riddle between those who have seen the photo under the right light, in the right silence. If the figure in the window was merely a trick of reflection, why does it appear sharper now than it did 50 years ago? Why does it seem closer?